Thank you, Alex, and thanks for everyone for being here. Welcome to the second part of the morning session. I'm David Wroe. Very pleased to be joined here by two eminent thinkers and practitioners in artificial intelligence. You have their biographies in your booklet, so I won't go through it all, but I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of points. Before founding Conjecture, Connor founded Leahy AI, which is a non-profit research collective that actually built the largest early open source GPT-like models. He was also a leading signatory to the famous 2023 pause letter by prominent AI experts calling for a moratorium on the development of AI models larger than GPT-4. Navrina, who's joining us from Palo Alto, California, as well as founding Credo AI, sits on the US Department of Commerce's National Artificial Intelligence Advisory Committee, which advises the US President on AI. She's also a board member of the Mozilla Foundation and an advisor to the United Nations AI Advisory Board, among other roles. Thanks to you both for joining us. And with that, I'm going to jump straight in. I want to start by giving you each a couple of minutes to describe your worldview on AI, explain where you're coming from, just so the audience knows who you are, summarize your key thoughts on the current state of AI, how it's changing the world, how it's poised to change the world. Connor, maybe you can kick off.
Yeah, of course. So from my perspective, AI is pretty obviously the largest technological change we will see in our lifetime, potentially ever. AI is not just another technology, it's a technology that enables other technology. Developing new technologies is currently bottlenecked by intelligence, by our ability to think, to come up with new ideas, to develop new technology. If we automate this, if we make it possible to create systems that are even smarter than humans, that are faster than humans, that don't get tired, that don't get distracted, and so on, this will vastly, unimaginably increase our ability to develop, deploy new technologies, businesses, strategies, military applications, etc. And from my perspective, such a change is hard to overestimate how important this is, how impactful this is. And that fundamentally, if we build systems that are smarter than us in every relevant dimension, and we don't know how to control them, which we currently do not know how to do, well, how's that going to end out for us? I don't think it can end well. So there's a fundamental, very, very deep question of how do we, as a society, want to address, how do we want to deal with these questions of what if there are things that are more powerful than us? Do we even want this? And if they do exist, how do we ensure that we continue to exist?
Useful, thank you. Navrina, to you, a quick 2-minute spray.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. As a founder of an AI governance startup, my worldview on AI is really shaped with not only a deep, profound sense of optimism, but a deep sense of responsibility. And I think I truly believe that I don't think AI's true potential is going to be realized only through the technological innovations that we all are betting on. It is actually going to be realized through the frameworks that we establish to govern its use. And I think, even Eric Schmidt previously was talking about, this innovation engine, but the innovation engine really needs a shift in mindset in how we are thinking about the relationship between power of these systems, the responsibility we have as leaders in this space. And so, for us, we think deeply about, these governance framework from a couple of different parameters. One is how can we create the right benchmarks and standards of evaluations of these systems. And as Connor was mentioning, very difficult to test something that you don't know how it performs. But there are right now inherent problems within these systems that we should be thinking about solving by building a strong posture of risk and compliance. But the second is, I think, alignment. When we start talking about agentic AI, what are we going to align those systems with? Because when you have something so powerful and can operate autonomously, how are we going to be guiding the outcomes that we want these agentic AI systems to actually be solving? So I keep coming back to, I think, we have a very exciting future ahead of us, which is going to enable this human prosperity and really an age of abundance, if you will, but only if we rethink our responsibility, rethink our governance, rethink the way we build trust, not only within these systems, but also with humans.
Yeah, I mean, certainly alignment of agentic AI is a huge question. Really a useful overview. Thanks to you both. I want to evaluate the current dominant approach, that of large language models. Now, some experts say that LLMs can keep scaling up and give us ever more powerful systems that will achieve eventually generalized intelligence, AGI, or artificial general intelligence. Others say that it has limitations. It will take at least one or two more fundamental breakthroughs before we can achieve something like AGI. Connor, you've described LLMs as proto-AGI. Just explain what you mean by that. Give us your view on whether it can keep growing or will it hit a ceiling.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny that like the pre-LLM era is not that long ago, but it feels like a generation ago. Back then, even in like the AlphaGo days, let's say, AI, as it was described, was very different from nowadays. It was extremely narrow and it was extremely fragile. You could make your AI do a specific thing if you had the right data and you tweaked it enough and you paid enough PhDs to stay long weekends to figure it out and so on. But fundamentally, it was fragile. You could get your AlphaGo, you could get your AlphaStar or whatever, and it would do something cool, it would do something impressive, but that was it. Whenever you need to do a new thing, you had to start a new AI project, you have to start a new thing, you have to get new data. That is not the case anymore. Now we have systems where you can just feed them garbage off the internet and they just slurp it all up and they learn patterns. They learn higher and higher abstraction patterns. This is what we've seen since GPT-2 into GPT-3 into GPT-4. GPT-2 learned some simple patterns. It could learn grammar, it could learn spelling, some basic things. GPT-3 could learn more abstract patterns. It could learn, more complex forms of semantic. GPT-4 can, solve complex tasks or explain quantum physics to you in Shakespearean English. This is astounding. I think to this day, people still do not fully reckon with how astounding this is, that these systems can autonomously, just by training on this data, learn these complex patterns. And this is what I mean by proto-AGI. GPT-4 was not built to explain English and Shakespearean English to you. That's not in the training set. In the training set, there is Shakespearean English and there is quantum physics. The combination of them is not in the training set. This is something the system was capable to generalize from. And this exists across the LLMs to various degrees. So is it a full human level intelligence? Well, no, not quite, as we can tell. But I don't think we're far from that. I think this was the hard step. And now sometimes I joke, AGI is going to be, GPT X, where X is 5 or 6, plus 1,000 lines of Python wrapper code or so on, where it needs access to tools, sure. It needs some form of external memory, sure. But this is an engineering problem.
The idea being that it could conceivably perform an entire range of tasks that it wasn't built for, it wasn't designed for, in a sense. It can just go off and do completely different things.
Absolutely. If I went back 2 million years and I showed you our nearest ancestor and a chimp, and I said, well, look, I made a new chimp. This new chimp has a slightly larger brain. What do you think it's going to do? You would probably say, I don't know, maybe it's going to throw rocks a little bit harder. But that's not what happened. That slightly smarter chimp went to the moon and built nuclear weapons.
Eventually, yeah. Navrina, what's your view on this? Infinite scaling, or will it hit a ceiling?
This is a very complex and nuanced topic. I do want to address something that Connor said, that this is a technological problem. I don't think so. I think there's a component of it which is technological problem, because we have seen, obviously the rapid advancements in computing power, data availability, and model architectures have certainly driven impressive levels of scaling with LLMs. But I keep coming back to this notion that as you start thinking about, is it going to be beneficial LLM and can scale, we know right now larger models tend to exhibit more complex and unpredictable behaviors. So again, when you think about the risk of these large language models, at least the way we see the risk is in 3 categories. One is inherent risk, things that we are already aware of. So think about fairness challenges, security, adversarial attacks, prompt injections. And then you have a second category, which is around proliferation. That is when you have these foundation models and they sort of go through your value chain and start getting weaved into different applications, you're going to see new kinds of risks that start to emerge, including, misinformation, AI-introduced fraud, etc. But then there's this new category that we are seeing with these, I would say, really powerful systems around these emergent properties. which we ourselves as AI experts don't know what those are and how we can manage the risk. So the only thing I wanted to sort of articulate is I agree on all the technological limits, the data limitations, environment and energy cost, but there's also a alignment limit that we are running into with these systems that we need to really deeply think about in terms of how we are going to measure and evaluate and test these systems, especially as we start to see emergent properties.
Okay, so you guys both work in safety. Obviously, you've devoted yourself to artificial intelligence, and you truly believe in it. In order to safely develop AI and get all of the benefits from it that we want to get from it, obviously it can deliver enormous advantages to humankind, but we actually need to find practical pathways to get there. Somebody actually needs to lay out a step-by-step roadmap to how we actually move forward in this to get the benefits without unacceptable risks. So, Navrina, perhaps sticking with you, Credo AI helps companies with governance, managing risk. What specific AI risks are you most worried about at the moment? What do you get in terms of the feedback from your customers? And just to explain, just in a practical sense, what does Credo AI actually help companies do?
Absolutely. I started Credo AI about 4.5 years ago, and as you can imagine, on the spectrum of risk, we are thinking about everything from the right now risk of fairness, let's say in HR systems, hiring systems, education systems, all the way to emergent risk. But the things that we are practically bringing to our customers, and our customers not only include Global 2000s, but we work a lot with different governments, and so we are looking at military applications as well. What is really fascinating for us is the right now risks are really grounded in things that can impact reputation. So this can be fairness, transparency, security of these systems. Second category is legal risk. When you start thinking about copyright issues, when you think about IP leakage issues, privacy issues. Other category is regulatory risk. Obviously, there's an emergent set of standards like ISO 42001 or EU AI Act that are on the market that now companies need to start figuring out how do you actually show adherence to. And then we also deeply think about, risks that are emerging from especially security challenges in military applications. So these could be prompt injections. How can we actually have better red teaming for these systems so that you can actually do comprehensive evaluations? So Credo AI is an AI governance platform that basically enables organizations to do three things really well for right now AI systems. The first is alignment. Aligning on what does good look like for you in terms of measuring these AI systems. Second is really making sure within those bounds of alignment, whether it's you're aligned to a standard or a regulation or company policies or your own industry policies, how can you actually interrogate not just your models and data sets, but your AI use cases? Because so much of governance is contextual, especially when you think about these large foundation models, which are dual purpose. That means they can be applied to different applications. The context of use matters, whether you're using it for biological weapons or whether you're using it to hire somebody, right? So the context is really critical. And then the last really thing that we do is comprehensive risk assessment and compliance on an ongoing basis. As you can imagine, once you deploy these systems, your work is not done. You have to actually monitor, are these systems continuing to perform according to the aligned values within your organization and in the real world. So for us, we are really focused on building the trust posture as well as risk and compliance posture for organizations so that they are well equipped to deal with future risks that these systems are going to present that we don't know yet.
Sure.
And right now, if you look at organizations and the way they are structured, as well as the leadership, they are not set up to deal with the dynamic risk that comes with this very powerful technology.
So, I mean, you're focused very much on the here and now risk for the moment, but that's a foundation for building on future risk management that we don't necessarily know about yet. Connor, you're very focused on the really big picture, the potential catastrophic or even existential risk. Explain to us what Conjecture does. You have pioneered an approach called cognitive emulation. Just explain what you're doing in very simple terms. How is it different from the mainstream LLM approach?
Yeah, fundamentally, I care about the question of how do we make the future go well with AI. This is a huge question, of course, not a problem I can solve by myself, needless to say. I tried to divide the problem into three main parts: the technical part, the political part, and the philosophical part. I only think about the philosophical part on the weekend, and so we will not be talking about that today. But fundamentally, the political problem of AI is how should we regulate these technologies? How do we as a society want to allow people to deploy these technologies, as Mr. Schmidt talked about earlier? The problems of open source, how much do we want to allow people to publish or develop dangerous software and then share it with any actor that wants access to it? These kinds of questions. I think this is a very, very important part, which I care about a lot. In my work at Conjecture, we work on the technical problem. So there's the larger technical problem, which is the huge technical problem of superintelligence alignment. Also, as Mr. Schmidt said, a superintelligence is a hypothetical AI system that is smarter than all of humanity combined. There's no reason to expect these systems are not constructible. Given everything we currently know, it should be possible to build these systems. And very likely, once you've built a human-level system that runs at, say, 1,000x human speed, which is not impossible for computer systems, that never gets distracted, never gets bored, has read every book ever written, well, that system is probably as smart or smarter than John von Neumann and can do 2 years of research per day. Mm-hmm. Such a system would probably produce a superintelligence extremely quickly. So for me, there's this question of how fast do we get to human-level AGI systems? Because I think from the time from AGI to ASI to superintelligence will be very short, potentially months or even weeks. So the question is, how do we approach where we are right now, which is not yet human level and the intermediate space, and how do we prevent ourselves from going from human level to superhuman level? Because we have currently no idea whatsoever how to control a superintelligent system. The moment humanity is in a position where a superintelligent system exists that is not perfectly aligned, perfectly controlled, it's game over. So our primary policy goal must be to not get into this situation. And there is a technical component to this, where at the current moment in time, we don't know how to control AI systems even today, not fully. We have some things, we have boundaries and we have tests and evals and so on. But as Mr. Schmidt said very eloquently as well, there's this problem of emerging capabilities, where we already now have systems that can lie to users, that can manipulate users, there's many papers on this topic and so on. This is obviously not intended behavior. And we can kind of fine tune them to kind of not do that, but it doesn't work 100% of the time. Because fundamentally, we don't know what goes on inside of these systems. So the technical problem of control, which is what we worked on in Conjecture, is the technical problem of how do you make AI systems that do what you want to do and nothing else. And we address this problem with our paradigm, which we call cognitive emulation, which is an approach where instead of trying to make the biggest possible blob that knows everything, and you ask the magic blob to solve your problem, we instead approach things from a more traditional direction of how we develop good software. There are, when we develop complex software in any other instance where reliability, controllability, and maintainability are important, we don't create a massive blob of code that has billions of benchmarks and tests that we run every time we change a line of code. But this is how we currently develop AI systems. So our approach is that we instead decompose as much as possible these cognitive applications, cognitive tasks into smaller subcomponents that we can then test, understand, isolate, and debug to a much higher standard of reliability. And then by composing these things into larger and larger cognitive libraries, procedures, recipes, as you would like to call it, you can then bootstrap yourself into being able to write complex cognitive programs. This is different from asking the magic blob in that it is something that you can actually test. You can see where did my program fail, where did the AI lose coherence, and how do I fix this problem? It's a more structured and practical application, scalable application towards developing complex cognitive systems. This is not a full solution to the problem of alignment. It is a tool set but it allows you to build things that do what you want them to do. But this does not solve the problem of misuse. Such systems can still be misused by adversaries or even just uncareful users.
If they're controlled tools, yes, then they can be controlled to do anything that you want to do, including malicious, malign activities.
Exactly,
Right?
and this is where the larger political problems come into.
Sure,
there is no technical solution for a good future.
Right.
It is impossible. Techno-optimism is not a replacement for humanism. Fundamentally, there must also be a societal and a political part of the solution.
I feel like it'd be useful right now just to take a step back and just talk about how LLMs are actually different from, say, software. You've got a good analogy about how LLMs aren't actually programmed, they're grown.
Yes.
Just explain that.
Yes, there's often a misconception where people think of AIs as they're used today as software. They are not in the traditional sense. Traditional software is written by a programmer using code. They write down line by line what the computer is supposed to do. This is not how AIs work. AIs are more like grown. You have huge supercomputers and massive piles of data, and then you grow a program on your data to solve it. It's more like a search process. You search through billions of possible programs of neural network configurations called weights, as Mr. Schmidt said earlier, that solve your problem. And so the final output of this process is not a list of instructions. It's a massive pile of numbers. And these numbers make no sense to humans. They're just billions and billions of numbers, and for some reason, if you multiply and add them the right way, they work. But we don't fundamentally know why. There is an emerging field of research called mechanistic interpretability, which is working on trying to understand these numbers, but it is an extremely nascent field, and we know very, very little of what happens inside of these systems at this point in time.
So if it grows and turns out to have 2 heads and 3 arms and 4 legs, you don't know why.
Yeah, we have no idea
why.
There's no
way to go back through the code and figure it out.
No, exactly. And it's even worse than that in that degree. It's kind of like you have a weird bacterium in a petri dish and you're using it for fermentation. Yeah. It looks fine, but turns out if the temperature is slightly different, it starts producing poison.
Right.
And this happens with AI systems all the time.
Right. Okay. I mentioned before, you're both passionate, you've devoted your careers to AI. So we need to talk about the upside, of course. It's been a bit of doom and gloom, but describe, perhaps to you first, Navrina, describe a future that you can plausibly envisage, say, the middle of the century, where we've done everything right, we've got all the guardrails in place, we've got to where we want to be. What does that look like? What are the global challenges, the human challenges that you're most excited about having AI solve?
If we get it right, and if we do have the right governance structures in place, and if we do take all the responsibility that these powerful systems are, going to be solving for, I think it could become a catalyst for human flourishing. And some of the areas that I am really excited about is first and foremost climate change. It's interesting right now we see LLMs as literally boiling the ocean because they are just this massive energy hungry systems because the training takes so much energy to actually, just train these systems. I think there's an upside to it that when we can actually use these powerful systems to actually figure out how we can actually solve some of the big climate problems that we are facing as a planet, I think that is an area that really excites me. The second is healthcare. I mean, we already are seeing examples where new kind of medication and medicine based on just my specific, DNA sequencing and can be very, very personalized medication that can be provided to me. I think that's really exciting. And then the third area that I do get very excited about is education. I have a 10-year-old. And I already see her day in, day out using some of these new AI tools, everything from Claude all the way to Midjourney. And it's been really fascinating to watch how her cognition and her ability to be more creative has just augmented, obviously with me as the oversight provider when I observe, how she's using these tools. So again, I truly believe that we are going to see a much more productive, much more safer, much more exciting future when AI gets applied in a safe and responsible way to medicine, to healthcare, to education. But again, I also believe that AI can be a trusted partner in this human's journey, but it has to make sure that there has that alignment discussion that we've been having, that alignment actually happens. And that is a tough problem. We don't have solution for it. There's an alignment right now to rules and regulations, but that alignment in autonomous systems is something that we need to deeply start taking responsibility for.
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to living to 200 and having roughly 100 years of perfect leisure time, doing nothing else. Connor, same question to you. What are you excited about in terms of the upside?
Well, to be blunt, if we make it to the middle of the century, I am one of the most excited people alive because, oh man, our society will look very different from how it looks today. In a sense, the problem of AI is not really what I care about, or it's not really the thing that I think is what is the most important thing for humanity to look forward to the mid-century and the end of the century. Fundamentally, humanity is facing the problem of technology, is that we are building more and more powerful technology while our institutions and our culture and our warlike nature, doesn't necessarily keep pace with the amount of power that we have access to with these technologies. Sooner or later, we will build technology that is powerful enough to blow up the planet. And by that point, our society must be wise, stable, and coordinated enough to not do that. So if we made it to the mid of this century and we have not blown ourselves up, our society will be in a fantastically better position than it is right now. We will have better institutions, politics, international relations. There will be levels of peace, of coordination, of rule of law that are unheard of today. I think these are all extremely possible goals for humanity to achieve. I think this would be a fantastic thing. So even before we talk about AI, I would just be happy to live in such a society where we have international peace, where we have international rule of law, where powerful technologies are held to democratic accountability, where we don't deploy dangerous technologies for profit, but we actually think about, as Mr. Schmidt said earlier today, that we just don't just do it upon humanity without knowing what we are doing or what the consequences are. And then, of course, if we actually have powerful AI in this future, if we decide to build superintelligence, which I think will be technically feasible by that point in time, well, the true answer
is it mid-century?
Yes.
Right.
I expect that I think human level intelligence is possible in the next 3 to 10 years probably. And if we have human level intelligence, then I think we can get superhuman intelligence within the next 6 months.
Right.
And if we have superintelligence, I don't know what happens. I don't think anyone can know what happens then. We will be in a world where the future is not primarily driven by humans. And this is something we must reckon with, is that if we as a society decide to build superintelligence, then humanity no longer provides economic value. Humanity no longer provides political power. All power will be centralized in these superintelligence systems. It's kind of like how chimpanzees currently hold no political or economic power. The same thing will happen if we decide to build superintelligence. Now, this doesn't mean that we couldn't have a fantastic world, right? Maybe if we let the superintelligences run all the boring government jobs, apologies to anyone here who loves their job, and produce a great society for us and develop medicines and entertainment and virtual reality and whatever. I don't know, sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
But there will be a philosophical reckoning. It's the problem I promised we wouldn't talk about, but here we are, of the question of what do we want as humanity. I think the first problem is how do we make a choice at all? Currently, we're not making a choice. The market is just doing whatever the hell it wants, which is not aligned with human values. And even if we get this under control, if we have international law and coordination around this, there is the fundamental question of what do we want to do? I don't know. If we no longer have war, if we have incredible medicine and technology and entertainment, what do we want to do with our time here on Earth? And I don't think I have an answer for this question at this point in time.
Okay. Navrina, on the big existential question, is it possible for a less powerful, less intelligent entity to control a much more intelligent, much more powerful entity? Is that logically possible?
It's a profound question, and maybe let me take a step back and sort of say something that Connor was alluding to. I truly believe we are on the trajectory where AI is going to become more powerful. It is not only going to have human-like intelligence, but it's going to pass human intelligence, and it potentially could be making decisions that have far-reaching consequences. And I think the question is not just of whether we can control such an advanced AI, but whether we are prepared to take the necessary steps to ensure that we do. And I think this, again, goes back to this trajectory that we are on, which I believe is sort of out of our control right now. But what we can control is proactive governance. We can control transparent research. We can control prioritizing human-centric outcomes. And we can really control like this global collaboration, not only between the private sector and public entities, but I also believe that there is global collaboration on what could alignment, again, what could good look like for each and every entity. So again, I don't think about can we control or not control. I think the decision and the question that we have is whether we are prepared to take the necessary steps to ensure that we do. And that is something we deeply think about at Credo AI day in, day out.
Do you think there's much optimism? I mean, are there grounds for optimism at the moment that we can do that? I mean, I'm not sure that the signs are really there, are they?
So this is the thing, one of the beautiful things about being human is optimism. So I, as a founder, have a lot of optimism, but we do need to do a lot of work. Right now, it is fragmented. We all are thinking about AI from just the benefits of AI. I think this really needs a much more strategic thought around responsibility. It needs more strategic thought around governance. Something I do want to address where I think there was a conversation around innovation and how we are releasing software on a daily basis. And I think this is where we need to adapt the idea of, or acknowledge that maybe in a future world, there's also this idea of dynamic policymaking and dynamic governance, where you're not expecting perfection out of the gate, but you're enabling actually institutions and policymakers and regulators to work with private sector to have a dynamic way to align to new capabilities of artificial intelligence rather than static policy. And I think we are not there yet. And so I would just encourage this audience to really think about, how can we create a world where we are a little bit more iterative and experimenting with governance structures rather than expecting to be perfect out of the gate. And we should not expect regulations to be perfect. We should not expect policies to be perfect or standards to be perfect, because AI is changing so fast that we have to change these standards. We have to change our evaluation criteria. We have to change our regulation. And I think that, unfortunately, right now is not what everyone is aligned on.
I mean, there isn't even really an existing paradigm for regulation of a lot of these questions, I suppose. I mean, one thing that strikes me is our refusal or failure to heed some of the warnings. Now, Connor, you've expressed astonishment, and I've got to say I can't help sharing this, that some of the titans of frontier AI have themselves said that the risks could be catastrophic, and yet they're racing to build the next biggest thing anyway. And we as societies are all sitting back going, yeah, okay, that seems cool. In June 2015, Sam Altman told a tech conference, I think that AI will probably, most likely, sort of lead to the end of the world. Now, I read that and I think, okay, that's relevant. He told the New Yorker magazine sometime after that he preps for survival and that he stashed, quote, guns, gold, potassium iodide, antibiotics, batteries, water, gas masks from the Israeli Defense Force, and a big patch of land in Big Sur that I can fly to. So, I mean, my question is, what the hell's going on? Are they putting their natural commercial and competitive instincts, which are clearly very fierce, ahead of other considerations? Is there a prevailing view in Silicon Valley that this is just inevitable, and whether it's a post-humanist thing or an effective accelerationist thing, they just think, well, this is the way things have got to move? Is it a combination of those two things? What's going on?
Well, the bad news I have for Mr. Altman is, unfortunately, your land in Big Sur will not protect you from superintelligence. But that being said, it's definitely all of the above. There is a bit of a confusion here where people will say things like this. This is Sam Altman is by far not the only one. There are many people, including Mr. Schmidt, who have said on the record many times that AI could spell the end of society as we know it, and even likely to do so. Yet some people, like Sam Altman and others, are pushing forwards in these directions. I think there's a number of reasons for this. I think one is just genuine cognitive dissonance, genuine inconsistency. People are inconsistent. I'm inconsistent. You're inconsistent. It happens. On one hand, people hear good arguments about X, but then also they hear good arguments about Y, and they have contradictory beliefs. I think that's one of them. I think another big one is that deep down, I think a lot of people, this is a thing that is a bit strange for people who have not been to the Bay Area a lot, but a lot of people see this as a good thing. So there are people like, say, Rich Sutton, who is a very famous professor, who's very clear that he thinks humans going extinct is great, and we should do it as fast as possible, because humans are terrible. You may laugh, but this is very much a real position. I don't think Sam Altman necessarily holds this position, but this is a position that people working on these technologies do hold. And there's a milder version of this, well, death cultish belief that is quite common in Silicon Valley, which is a belief of something like, well, it has a 20% chance of killing everyone, but 80% chance they get to live forever, so it's worth it. Again, it seems comical to us, but this is a very true, deeply felt, almost religious aspect that is quite common in tech companies, especially OpenAI, Anthropic, these big companies. There is a transhumanist is the word I would use to describe it, form of ideology or religion, almost like proto-religion, which worships AI to a certain degree as a form of God or a form of savior of some kind. That will solve all our problems, cure all our diseases, let us live forever, bring heaven on earth. And if you truly believe this, if we ignore the ridicule for a second, if we take this seriously, well, then taking a 20% chance seems quite reasonable, actually. Well, unfortunately, for us, normal people who have lives and children who we would not want to see killed, I don't think these people should be allowed to make decisions like this.
Okay. Navrina, you're in the heart of Silicon Valley right now. How do you see this? And how seriously do you think the industry takes the most extreme safety questions?
Not seriously enough. So I think let's just look at numbers. If you look at just in the last year, how much has the investment community, the VCs and others invested in safety and responsible AI startups? Less than 0.002%. If you look at the amount a public company is spending on AI, responsible AI and safety, first and foremost, the numbers aren't even disclosed, but just through some of the anecdotal data, and given that I do come from some of these large companies, it's less than 2 to 3%. So I think a big part of where you're putting your investments and money is an indication of what you deem necessary and what you deem important. And then same thing if you think about government. Yes, there's been in the past 3.5 years a lot of great work on responsible AI principles, whether they are with US DoD or whether they are even if you think about regulations like EU AI Act. But the challenge is how much actual capital is getting assigned to those initiatives. Is there an authority in place who's making decisions and prioritizing governance? Absolutely not. So I think we are a little bit living in this world of leading with blog posts, but not putting in actions, where I think it's really critical where we start thinking about innovation and not move fast and break things, but move fast with intention. And so, right here in Silicon Valley, we have such a great opportunity because we innovate so fast and we innovate a lot of great things, is what can we do more on governance? And unfortunately, right now, the data does not support it. So I think the key thing for us, especially as as a Credo AI, we've been trying to change the narrative around governance actually is going to enable you to go faster. Think about, if you have the fastest car, a Ferrari or a Bugatti, but it doesn't have brakes, guess what? It's kind of a useless piece of equipment. But it's once you have the brakes and once it's going around the race course, you also need the pit crew, because the race is not won in the first lap, it's won over a couple of different laps, right? So how do you actually think about that investment you need to make in not only the command and control for governance, the brakes, but also the investment you need to make in this continuous evaluation and benchmarks is really key. And unfortunately, right now, the investments are not pointing to that.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to give the audience a go at the risk of being greedy myself, because I do have more questions. But if anyone wants to put their hand up and ask our panelists a couple of questions, then please go for it. We've got roving mics. Please identify yourself. Yep, I can see one over here.
Hi everyone, I'm Ravi Nair. I'm a PhD scholar at the University of Sydney. Thank you to the panel, really fascinating discussion. We've been talking about governance and policy and regulation. My question is about those massive repositories of AI models like your Hugging Faces that are run by companies. I was just wondering, can we analogize to like what GitHub does with requiring MFA for all user accounts, secret scanning, perhaps subjecting all libraries to some sort of fuzzing to identify vulnerabilities? Can there be a requirement or the AI industry to come together that these repositories, these platforms should introduce such controls on a mandatory basis for their users? Thank you.
Who'd like to go first?
I'm happy to go. Ravi, what a great question, because absolutely that needs to happen. So a couple of things that are already getting discussed in some of the groups that I'm part of. One is around sandboxes. Is there a way that we could, even in these open source systems like Hugging Face, can we actually have sandboxes which does have some compliance requirements that can be the first passage of this AI into the open source world? And this sandbox would have certain guardrails that we deem necessary before launching things in open source. Similarly, this, I'm sure you might have looked at something called as responsible use license. I think that's such a great idea, which is already being tested out at Hugging Face, where essentially when you launch a model, it comes with it a responsible use license, which clearly articulates where the system can and cannot be used. Obviously, how do you enforce it so that the malicious actors are not actually using these systems for the unintended consequences that we've been talking about is really key. So I think absolutely, I think there's conversations right now happening around these sandboxes, around licensing, and also making sure certain core requirements around guardrails and disclosures that need to be met before launching systems in open source. So more to come on that, I would say later this year and early next year.
Connor, quick response, or are you happy?
Not much to add on that. I think the main problem is that the things I'm concerned about, there are no technical solutions or tests for. This is an open scientific question. I think maybe one more comment that I think is worthwhile to say is that the danger of AI is not some evil property that is inside of AIs that must be removed. Competence is what makes them dangerous. Power is what makes them dangerous. Power is inherently neutral. If you build an extremely powerful AI system that has no evil property, that's not sufficient to make it safe.
I think we can take one more from the floor. Yes, Mr. Brazer. Microphone down the front, please, if we could. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Latvia's Foreign Minister by Raja. My question is on the future AI workforce for both of you. That with the projection expected that some of the technical roles might be taken over by the generative AI, how do we maintain that variety of the workforce with a human element and ethical aspects in it? And how do we prepare for that?
Well, from my point of view, of course, this very much depends on how close we are to human-level general intelligence. If we build human-level general intelligence, there are no more human jobs. That's it. Nothing you can do, I guess, other than make it illegal and make international people make it illegal. Not much you can do there. So there are questions about maybe we would want to restrict the development of such systems. We want to slow down the development of such systems. I think this is very wise. But fundamentally, if you build a system that is 1,000 times more productive than your humans and costs 2 cents per hour, then humans get outcompeted out of the market, and there's simply nothing you can do about that other than restrict the market.
Navrina?
Wow, tough question. But I look at everything on a time horizon. So I would say in the next at least 3 to 5 years, there's a very important role humans have to play in this age of AI. And I think this is where AI literacy becomes really critical. Yes, many jobs are going to be sort of replaced with artificial intelligence. We are seeing this day in, day out. But we are also seeing emergence of new jobs. And I'll give you an example. My company, which is a very small 50 people team, but we use day in, day out AI for coding. And it's not replaced the engineers within my company. But what has happened is my engineers have now become more productive, and they're sort of like the overseers and the oversight providers for the AI that is being created by things like GitHub Copilot. So there's a different role, and I am seeing this really amazing human AI collaboration in the right now scenarios. So yes, once super intelligence is here, what we'll become is a different question. But my hope is that we evolve like we always do to find our role in that world of AI. And I think for us to get to that level, we have to really become competent and literate in artificial intelligence and learn as fast as possible, furious as possible. And human oversight is going to play a critical role in this age of AI.
All right, thanks very much to you both. Connor, Navrina, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks for listening, everyone.